Hello, you're on the Cemetery Whispering channel. Don't forget to subscribe and like it, and I promise you won't fall asleep tonight.
Ghosts and spirits. Scary night. I often think about death. Or rather, not about death itself, but about the people who are gone. I wonder if they feel anything on the day they must die. When one wakes up in the morning, perhaps one feels some kind of discomfort or something else. Maybe a person starts his day as usual, not knowing that he is going to die today. He had plans, dreams for the future, but at the appointed hour, when you least expect it, bam, that's it. He had a stroke, was hit by a car, or something else. It doesn't really matter that much. And now I wonder if Marina and Roman knew they were going to die that day. As usual, they woke up, starting the morning with their usual rituals. After breakfast, Roma, my younger brother, headed off to work, while his wife, Marina, stayed home doing chores. Neither of them probably knew that they both had no more than a few hours to live. The tragedy unfolded at the beginning of the 11th hour, when, as in the anecdote, her husband suddenly returned home, except that the outcome was no fun at all. My brother saw his wife in the arms of another man. Yes, from the wife's side was not very clever to bring a lover into the matrimonial bed. But what now? Without thinking much, Romka went to the garage, where he took a gun. When he returned, he shot his lover and then his wife in cold blood. About 30 minutes later, my brother hanged himself after emptying a bottle of whiskey. That's about how it happened, according to the experts who arrived at the scene of the murder and suicide. On the other hand, I would argue with them about cold-bloodedness. I don't think a husband who catches his wife with another man is going to walk around with a clear head. More likely the opposite. And now, being in my brother's house, I wonder if either of them knew they were going to die, that perhaps there was anxiety, a dream, or something else. After all, they say that those who are dying see their nearest and dearest before they die, those who have gone before. So why shouldn't there be some kind of feeling? Yes, just questions and no answers. Understand, I don't take it upon myself to judge my brother and my wife. Who am I? He did what he did, and there's no going back. There is no coming back to life for either of them. Romka and Marina are in the grave, buried 9 days ago. God judges them, but not me. Right after the funeral, I stayed at my brother's house. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to get some things in order, and it wasn't human to leave right away. I stood for a long time in the very room where the tragedy had taken place. You could still see the blood splattered on the wallpaper as the lovers' heads exploded from the gunshots. Did Marina plead with her husband as she saw the barrel of a gun staring back at her? What was her lover doing in his last moment? And Romka himself? All questions again. As best I could, I cleaned the house, throwing out all kinds of junk, since soon I was going to sell the place. Even in a couple of days, I managed to re-glue the wallpaper in that very room, replacing it with new ones. There was not much work. I kept only the bed and all the furniture wasted around the house, thus freeing up space. One night, the whole damn thing started. When I went to sleep on the bed, where 2 people had been killed, I heard some strange noises. Yeah, I know. One might ask, wasn't there another place to sleep? For example, in another room. Let me put it this way. There wasn't. There were rooms, but there wasn't room. To be honest, I wasn't too happy to sleep on that bed. But what could I do? I could not sleep on the floor when it was bitter winter outside, when a floor cold in the house. Of course, it was possible to go back to my apartment, but I lived at that time in 60 kilometers, and therefore, by some means I settled down without undressing and tried to sleep, but in vain. My thoughts revolved around the tragedy that had occurred. Somehow, I could not believe that 2 close people were gone. It seemed that now I would hear my brother's voice and joyful laughter of Marinka. I always liked my daughter-in-law. We somehow got along quite well from the beginning, and then such an unpleasant surprise. As I wrote above, some sounds came to my ears. A faint coughing sound that came from the kitchen. No, it couldn't have been the neighbors. The house is private and separated by a lot, so you know. I got out of bed and cautiously made my way to the kitchen, but found nothing there. I even looked out the window, trying to see something in the dark. Nothing either. Went around the whole house. I was disappointed, or should I say relieved. Nevertheless, the various oddities continued. In the kitchen, the faucet turned, and a jet of water hit the sink with force. The cistern in the toilet flushed by itself. The light in the hallway turned on, then went out a second later. Hurried footsteps, a distant cough, reached my ears. A door in the far room creaked pitifully, and then slammed shut violently, though there was no draft inside. Someone groaned, and then laughter was heard from the living room. A strong smell of perfume wafted up my nose. My nerves, I would say, are pretty strong, but at the time, to be honest, I doubted my sanity. Had I gone completely insane? Or maybe it was just a play on my imagination. You know how it is when you're in a place where some tragedy has happened. All sorts of things come into play, and then you start to involuntarily get yourself wound up. I stood frozen in the corridor, waiting for everything to happen, wondering whether to call a cab and then run home, or to continue to stand there as a frightened turkey. But at that moment, everything fell silent, plunging the house into a blessed silence. Going around the house, I turned on the lights everywhere, as well as the TV, so it wouldn't be so scary. In the kitchen, I turned on the radio and some music. After that, I only calmed down a little, still feeling a slight shiver in my hands, wondering if I should leave this place. Wiping the cold sweat from my forehead, on cotton legs, I made my way to the bed, sitting down on it, trying to comprehend what had just happened. I wanted to leave this abode of madness, but, like in some horror movie, I was simply afraid to take a step because it might provoke something present here to take new action. My eyelids slowly began to close, and as I lowered my head to the pillow, I didn't notice how I fell asleep myself. Maybe it was the incomprehensible situation. Some people extreme people XXXX, some to pexting and pixicle call, such and pico, and I jumped up at the rumble of a gunshot. The glowing clock showed the beginning of 2 a.m. Darkness reigned in the rooms as the lights and TV were turned off for some unknown reason. Someone screamed wildly, and then I heard another clap. When I looked around, I did not see, but rather felt someone lying beside me. I stretched out my hand and touched it to something sticky and wet. In the wrong light of the moon, I could make out a human figure. It was a woman, Marina. She was lying naked, dead. There was almost nothing left of the right side of her face. The shot had disfigured her once beautiful features, milling everything into flesh and hair. But suddenly, Marina's head jerked and turned in my direction. The only surviving eyes stared at me, gleaming frantically in the gloom. The mouth opened slightly, and a mournful croak was heard from the depths. Then a bloody bubble emerged from the black depths, bursting with a characteristic sound, and my iron nerves failed. It wasn't every day you woke up next to a dead man in the same bed. I rolled off the bed with a loud shriek, my feet tangled in the blankets. I crawled away on all fours, whimpering with animal horror as I continued to hear the moaning wheezing. After a couple of meters, I bumped into something hard. When I felt it with my hands, I realized it was 2 legs. Someone was hanging from the ceiling, swaying slightly from side to side. My pant legs were wet, with an unpleasant smell of urine. I recoiled in horror, falling on my back, but immediately settling back down. There was wheezing behind me, and my brother was swinging in a noose in front of me. I felt like a cornered animal. It was a good thing the other type, the murdered lover, was out of sight and sound. The bed creaked heavily behind me, and then Marina's cold palm rested on my shoulder. She wrapped her arms around my neck like a snake, pulling the back of my neck against her naked breasts, whispering some words into my ear with her bloody lips. "Honey, you know I can't live without you, don't you?" I tried to free myself from her embrace, but she only held me tighter to her. "You don't understand." She started stroking my hair like a little child. "You must understand me. I can't live without you. I'm very cold here alone, cold and painful. I confess I don't know what my sister-in-law meant. We never had any relations with each other, although I liked Marina a lot in appearance. Then what was the point of what she said? It remained forever a mystery to me. "Hold me," she whispered. "Hold me tight and don't let go." Then she leaned over and ran her wet tongue down my cheek, slowly, as if she were enjoying the moment. "Give me a kiss." Rumka was still dangling in the noose, staring at us with bulging dead eyes, and his tongue, like a huge slug, stuck out of his mouth, twitching slightly. Hands reached out unsuccessfully in our direction. I jumped to my feet, screaming and swearing, covering the distance to the wall at once, slamming the light switch with my palm. A bright light came on under the ceiling, blinding me for a while. Breathing heavily, I blinked my eyes open and saw. I saw absolutely nothing. A crumpled bed, and that was it. There were no dead people. There was no Marina. My brother wasn't there. I was alone in the room, relieved to catch my breath. Thinking I was dreaming or imagining things, I put my palm to my face to wipe away the sweat and froze. My hand was stained with blood. I remembered trying to palpate what was lying next to it and coming across something sticky and wet. So it must have been. It wasn't all a delusion. But where had the blood come from if the phantoms had disappeared? Or rather, why was there blood on my hand, on my head and hair, and on the switch I had hit with my palm? I never fell asleep again that night. I sat with the light on in the kitchen until morning, drinking coffee and smoking cigarette after cigarette, listening fearfully to the slightest sound, shuddering at every creak. The dead, or ghosts, whatever they really were, never appeared again. Except, I wondered, why had I seen them at night, when the murder was almost lunchtime? Questions again. Probably because nighttime is more conducive to these kinds of forces. At least I think so. Soon, I managed to sell my brother's real estate. As far as I know, none of the new tenants complained about something similar to what I encountered. The phantoms didn't visit them, but I remembered that night for the rest of my life, still shuddering with fear.